Thank you very much and welcome to the Planning Commission on May 1st, May Day of 2024. My name is Janice Huxford. I will chair the meeting this evening. And if you would all please rise and join me in the national anthem or the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd like to sing, by all means. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Classic. Well, anybody that wants to sing, you can save it till after we're off live. Let's go through roll call. Commissioner Packard. Present. Commissioner Morton. Commissioner Holt. Present. Commissioner Dewar. Here. I am also here. We have two commissioners that are absent, Chair Davis and Commissioner Davis. Do I have a motion to excuse them?
And I'll second it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Do we have anybody on guest business? Is there anybody online joining us? Do we have our council member liaison joining us? Okay. That is fantastic. Thank you to him for joining us. With that, we're moving on to the fourth item on the agenda. This will be action items. The minutes of Planning Commission from 2 weeks ago, did all of the commissioners have time to review those meeting minutes? Were there any additions, changes, comments?
I reviewed them. They look good and I move that we put them into the record.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved as written. Thank you. This is going to be a record, even for me, if we keep going this quickly. We're on to discussion item number 5. This is when we turn the time over to Senior Planner Leviton to discuss the draft of environment and natural resources elements. Upcoming critical areas ordinance updates.
Great. Or are you going to minimize that? All right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Planning Commission. David Levitan, Senior Planner. So we are here tonight continuing our review of the draft elements for the comprehensive plan as part of our periodic update that's mandated by the state. Tonight's focus is on the environment and natural resources element. So we're going to focus on that, provide a little bit of an overview of the element, some of the updated goal and policy language, some of the updated background narrative and graphics, and then talk a little bit about one of the implementation items coming out of this chapter. We'll be updating our critical areas ordinance, which is in chapter 1488 of the municipal code for Lake Stevens. And that's something, it's going to be relatively minor update incorporating things like best available science. So we'll get a little bit into that later on in the presentation. So kind of providing a slide that I shared with you last meeting, just a little bit on where we're at on the comprehensive plan update. Obviously did a lot of our outreach back last spring, summer, and fall. And over the course of the last several months, the Planning Commission has been reviewing draft elements. So that's where we're at currently. We're going to be doing some additional public outreach specifically related to housing and land use, as well as transportation and capital facilities. We're going to talk a little bit about that later on in the meeting. And then we're going to be basically needing to issue basically a public review draft and also issuing that draft to the Department of Commerce for our required 60-day review. So that will allow review both by the state, by PSRC, as well as by the public to allow them for the opportunity to comment on the draft document. And then with that, we'll also be issuing our State Environmental Policy Act document, basically to show the potential significant environmental impacts and any necessary mitigation related to those impacts. And then that summer of 2024, actually, well, that was not quite realistic. That's looking more like fall of 2024. I should have updated this slide, but that would be following that kind of public review and agency review would be where the planning commission would hold a public hearing, make a recommendation to the city council, and then they would hold a separate public hearing to consider that recommendation. So just a little bit on what we've reviewed to date. So far we've reviewed the parks, recreation and open space, public services and utilities, the introduction, the economic development element. And then tonight we're reviewing the environment and natural resources element. That leaves us with the transportation, capital facilities, land use and housing. And so those will be upcoming over the next couple of months. All right, so just a little bit about the environment and natural resources elements. So unlike elements like housing and land use and economic development, this is not a mandatory element. It is, I can't think of anything more fun for a girl to do than to come to a planning commission meeting on the environment and natural resources element. I mean, I think that Cindy was thinking of this back in 1985 when she wrote that. So, but
Just want to have fun.
they do, and we're all having. So just a little bit more about it. So basically it serves to describe the Lake Stevens natural environment and then provide the policy framework and strategies for its protection. Also the policy foundation for our critical areas regulations within chapter 1488 of the municipal code, and then our shoreline master program as well, and other environmental regulations that come out and are implemented that basically implement the comprehensive plan. Kind of a major focus over the last several years that was already incorporated into the 2015 plan, but now with some recent state legislation is further addressing things like climate change, equity, and sustainability. So that's been really a focus on a lot of the updated policy language, as well as some of the background narrative, and where we would really appreciate, additional feedback from the Planning Commission, and where we'll be soliciting additional feedback from the public. So just a little bit of an overview of the updated elements. And I think this actually was attachment 1, but basically kind of some of the updated narrative serves to frame kind of the state and regional local planning with a focus on things like House Bill 1181, which really deals with climate change and incorporating climate change into comprehensive planning efforts. It talks a little bit about Vision 2050, some of the countywide planning policies. So basically updating a lot of that background information. We did include some additional sections and some additional documentation on things like surface water, obviously on climate change, and then also provided just a little bit more detailed analysis of things like shoreline regulations and the role of the Shoreline Master Program, the role of the Shoreline Management Act at the state level. So just to provide a little bit more context to readers that maybe aren't as familiar with the statewide planning framework. And then incorporated a number of new and revised policies, and these are just some examples of those. Those are all included within the document, and happy to discuss any of those or any ones that you feel are missing. But some of the major ones are, really a focus on better coordination with adjacent jurisdictions, tribes, and environmental groups. Some additional language on making sure that we're maintaining and updating the city's critical areas inventory to keep that, make sure that that reflects kind of best available science and reflects the current inventory. Making sure that we're implementing and then updating the climate sustainability plan, which was adopted back in 2023. Some language about monitoring the city's tree canopy coverage, prioritizing equity and affordability and climate change adaptation. So that could be things like additional shading or additional opportunities within lower income neighborhoods that maybe historically have, not been able to adapt to things like climate change and don't have the physical environment that maybe some other neighborhoods have. So making sure that we're considering that through our comprehensive planning efforts and through implementation programs coming out of the comprehensive plan. And then some language about incorporating sustainability into the city's contracting process. So happy to discuss any of those, or we can kind of hold off. This is just a really quick slide about the critical areas ordinance update that's going to be coming up. So for those of you that for Linda and Janice, I think Mike, maybe you weren't quite on yet for the 2019 critical areas ordinance update, but basically it's a code amendment. So it's a legislative amendment updating chapter 1488. Typically you do that following your comprehensive plan update. It's also on a kind of a periodic update schedule. And so we're going to be needing to be doing that after the comprehensive plan. So that'll be an implementation item. There aren't as many major changes as say probably the last couple of cycles of required periodic updates to the critical areas ordinance. There are some things requiring us to incorporate kind of updated best available science. So that's kind of the science that you use to document your critical areas protections, your wetland buffers, your stream buffers, all of that. There have been some changes with the wetland delineation manual. There's historically been one at the state level, actually the western half of the state, and that's been moved. The best available science is now using a federal manual on that. And then we're going to be required to go through Department of Commerce checklist to make sure that we're addressing all of the required updates to the critical areas ordinance. And as I note there at the bottom, it should be fairly minor in scope, and we'll be doing that, kind of starting that work later in the year. And so what we're looking for tonight, similar to the past meetings, is just to kind of review a lot of the draft revisions and provide some of that initial feedback, probably with mostly a focus on the policy language. I would note, especially on the items related to climate change and sustainability, we've been obviously reviewing chapters not sequentially, but kind of 1 or 2 chapters per month. And so we've kind of been incorporating a lot of this language as opposed to a standalone climate change element, which we're going to be doing by 2029. We've been incorporating that into existing elements. So there's probably a little bit of redundancy, say between this chapter and the public services chapter. There might be some redundancy with the capital facilities. So when we go back through the plan at the end and are really reviewing it holistically, we'll make sure, one, that we're covering all the topics that we need, but 2, that we don't have too much duplication or redundancy across chapters, and making sure that we're framing it within that specific topic area. If any feedback on if there are specific policies that deserve or require, metrics, that was something that came out of a couple meetings ago. Are there specific items, specific topics or concepts or topic areas that you think would be served by strengthening that policy language? Any ideas on the general structure of the element are welcome. And again, this is a work session. We've been holding work sessions for each individual element. We're not taking any action this evening, but just general thoughts so that we can incorporate that into updated drafts before we share those for public and agency review are what we're looking for tonight. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I had just a quick question on the new section 4.4.13, incorporate emissions reduction and other environmental requirements into the city's contracting process. Can you dive into that a little bit more? Are we talking about requirements for the contractors or requirements for how things are designed generally?
Yeah, I think it's more the latter. It's basically us establishing, kind of incorporating into our processes as opposed to having specific requirements. It's I think general in nature enough that we're wanting to be considering these things when we're obviously expending, public funds. And so just incorporating that into kind of a larger scale, basically considering this topic just as part of our kind of standard contracting process. And it needs to be implemented. So this is kind of the very squishy policy language. And then it's just kind of providing the policy foundation for how that would actually be implemented. So
Okay, so it leaves quite a bit of wiggle room for
it does,
the city
yeah.
should
And
need
so
it in the future.
it is, yeah. And that's how most of the policy language is, you're always towing a fine line between how prescriptive you're going to be. You don't typically have super prescriptive policy language, but it's at least being able to point to policy language within your comprehensive plan that this is a city priority, and then, you know, the programs and the ordinances are how we actually implement them, and that's how you actually establish like the nuts and bolts of doing it. So if that doesn't seem appropriate, or if it seems too general, that was kind of a later addition based on some additional feedback and some items within the climate sustainability plan. And so if it seems more appropriate to just keep that within the sustainability plan, we have other policy language about implementing the climate sustainability plan. So if it doesn't seem appropriate for the comprehensive plan and we want to keep that within the CSP, that's an option as well.
Facilities, services, but it's just trying to be a functional measure that is just another individual criterion as we're making decisions, you know, safety, cost. So it just becomes another part of that decision making.
Right. I guess my question is when you're determining, when you're going through, say, a analysis of a contractor's proposal, this could be interpreted, I think, one of two ways, that we could be analyzing, or the city could be analyzing what the overall emissions and environmental impact and requirements are for the project, or are you looking at the organization that would be doing the work? Because, you know, if you read it one way, it makes a lot of sense to me. If you read it the other way, it starts to get a little like, how do you quantify a particular company's sustainability efforts, and how does that factor into the analysis of whether or not to go with one of the bids that's been proposed?
And David, correct me, I think it's really geared more towards purchasing, not contracting, so we should
Yeah, so
probably
purchasing.
update that language as we go through
Okay.
that process, that we just want to make sure that as we purchase new equipment, vehicles, et cetera, that we're just looking at that as, again, another metric, but
That makes a lot more sense that way.
would be.
Yeah.
really hard to-
I think it makes a
Yeah.
lot more sense with that change.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely was the intent. So yeah, that the contracting was probably the wrong language there. And as Russ noted, I think because we haven't done the capital facilities yet, just this is an example, you know, something that was proposed that I thought, you know, was good to include. But then when you think about it, it does make more sense that is more the capital facilities component. So there will be definitely some shifting around of policy language once we get to a kind of more holistic review of the entire draft document.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Linda, for you. Bruce?
No, I reviewed the document and read through all the changes and then some of the stuff that wasn't changed, and everything looked just fine to me. I had no
And Commissioner
no
Packard?
complaints.
Sorry,
With the-
going through more stuff? Are these the opening questions, or you're still gonna have more presentation and then we can ask?
No, I'm all done with the presentation, so have at it with the questions.
If you can use the mic.
Sure. Just one, you talked about metrics, page 32. Specifically on the canopy. So just tracking and monitoring tree canopy coverage in the city to better capture carbon dioxide. It's also something similar in what MPP EN 9, right? Enhancing the urban tree canopy to support community resilience, et cetera. So I guess the question is, yeah, how much effort buys us how much value, right? We could spend a lot of dollars and not have any result. We could overspend when I don't know. I get that that's really difficult to quantify, but how much effort do we put and what value do we get out of it? So,
I think that would be an implementation phase, so
Yeah.
this just sort of sets,
Sure.
hey, this might be a priority over
Yep.
the next 10 years, and then at implementation, we'd have to do the hard work and do that
yep.
return on investment kind of
Yep.
analysis.
And then on page the 32, also 4.4.10, I don't think this is the intention, but you talk about prioritizing equity and affordability, such as increased tree canopy coverage in lower income communities. That could be interpreted as more tree canopy coverage in lower income communities than higher income communities.
That
Right.
is the intent, because some of the data, and David can go into this, the disparities in lower incomes, neighborhoods, they don't necessarily have access to the same type of landscaped lots. They're probably denser lots. They are probably a lot more hardscape. So no, that would be a goal to increase more natural features in potentially lower income neighborhoods.
I get that. What I'm worried about is it means make it so there are actually more, if you take a comparable low income community to a higher income community, you have more trees in the lower income community, as opposed to increasing the lower income community to where it's at the same level.
Where it's
as
equitable, yeah.
a higher income.
So we can, yeah, definitely. It's more intended to provide the equity to basically bring it up. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
It could be misinterpreted.
yeah, so we
that way.
can definitely, I totally
It
reading
shouldn't
through
be
that.
Increased, it should not,
It
it
should-
should be increasing.
It should be
Increasing
increasing to
or-
provide equity in the
To
distribution.
be
of-
equitable
yeah,
to
to be
other
equi-
communities type of thing. So small change, but could be interpreted that way.
Any other comments?
One typo, page 6. You use the phrase, consider and prioritize, I think on page 6. If I got it right, sorry. Where was it? I highlighted it and then I lost it. I'll find it and get back.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, and feel free to anytime to just send me an email as
Sure.
well on anything that you see on this. It's keeping you up late at night and, you know, Cyndi Lauper can't put you to sleep then.
No, when you start your day singing the national anthem like I do, every day's a good day. I had questions on trees, but you were able to answer those, but I do have a couple other questions and they mirror each other, but they're on different pages. So on the groundwater discussion on page 9 and the air quality on page 10, I was surprised to hear that the aquifer sits underneath where the city has allocated much of that space to pot production. And so our aquifer is evidently sitting in that space, and the air quality, we all know, is suffering because of that industry. So there is nothing in here that has checks and balances on what the current growth is, for lack of a better way of putting it. What that impact is going to be and how that's going to be measured.
And that is definitely something, and Russ and I have had these discussions and, you know, just as far as what that looks like. So critical aquifer recharge areas, if they're designated, they're considered critical areas under the Growth Management Act and they warrant and require protection. And so I think we probably will need to do some additional analysis as part of an implementation item to look to see what types of protections are needed and what types of code amendments specifically to our critical areas ordinance, which is pretty silent on them right now just because they haven't been designated and we don't have a lot of good science right now, but this is very much a hot topic right now in a number of different jurisdictions. You know, during my short time with the city of Edmonds, this was a major thing that we were talking about. The Olympic View Water and Sewer District was talking about it. There's a lot of concern about PFAS contamination into the drinking water supply. And other contamination. So this is definitely something I think at the plan and policy level, I think we do need a little bit more information and do a little bit more research on this, but a lot of it is we're going to have to do some additional analysis and potential code updates as an implementation item to make sure that we're utilizing the best available science and that it's compatible with the land uses there. Because
Mhm.
it's not ideal that it's basically located right next to our industrial area. And so that is something that we're going to need to do some additional work on.
And
Okay, I
the
appreciate-
change between the last plan and this plan,
Mhm.
if you'll all remember, that area wasn't annexed, so that was part of Snohomish
Right.
County. And we didn't have those conditions of these critical aquifer recharge areas. So now that's something we're faced with and that we need to put the effort in to see what those additional protection measures are. And it's probably just enhanced stormwater management, but those are definitely things that we need to look at over the next few months after the implementation.
That's why it stood out to me, because it's new and it's also a problem that we've created for ourselves. So I just wanted to make sure that we aren't, when we're trying to compare to other jurisdictions don't have light industrial that allowed pot production to be the corner of. And so just wanting to make sure that that was said during the meeting. The other thing that I was hoping for explanation on is page 16. And it is when we talk about this transfer paragraph and how it hasn't been used in the past, but future development becomes increasingly reliant on sites encumbered by critical areas. And then if you skip to page 23, 4.3.4, it says that we need to maintain critical areas. So are we transferring development for critical areas as we have done in the past? And then if we're doing that, how are we maintaining our critical area footprint if development is already a runaway train? So they seem to be somewhat, at least how I'm reading it. We're all reading this maybe different is how it was written, but how I was reading that is in the future, this transfer of development rights is going to be something that's going to be used more, but how do you do that and maintain the overall critical area mass that we need as a city?
So yeah, and I can let Russ touch on it as well, but the general concept of TDR is that you allow a site that is fairly encumbered by critical areas instead of, it's not proposing to allow them to basically build development within the critical areas. It's that you're taking some of the density that they would have been allowed there if it wasn't encumbered, and you're shifting that to a site that's not encumbered by critical areas.
Right?
So that's a program that we haven't really used, but as we still have ambitious growth targets over the next couple of decades, and we don't have really any of these nice, easy to develop greenfield sites anymore, then we're going to have to be more creative with how we accommodate our population and employment growth. And so it's finding sites within the community and implementing a program that's maybe easier to administer as far as how we shift some of that development and some of that density within the city. And so I guess, are you?
So let me add maybe just a little bit more. So to your first question, yeah, the primary goal under the Growth Management Act is we need to preserve critical areas in the different types. Then there's implementation, which is how do we protect that resource? And sometimes we make a decision that we're going to protect the resource here because it's a higher function, there's more value versus this very isolated thing. So that's sort of the merger with the two. And when we describe we haven't used TDR programs, transfer of development rights in the city a lot, we haven't. We've used them. There are a couple of different ways. We've used them with sort of a small case TDR where we've adopted regulations where on site we're going to do cluster development where we're going to say, okay, you could get 5 units on this, you only have room for 3. So the remainder of the area that you would have only been able to do 3, now you can do 5 to preserve that critical area. So that's been our strategy that we've been able to do in the past to protect critical areas. What this is describing also, the capital letter TDR, that's a countywide program where it really is. You could be transferring development rights from rural Snohomish County, where under the county zoning code, you could subdivide your property and you could get this type of development growth, and that becomes a protected asset. And then the city would take that density and then it has to go somewhere. So the land is protected, maybe not within the city, somewhere else. Again, it gets to what is the functional value and the scale. So that's the bigger program, and why we haven't used that, because county itself doesn't have a very developed program and a set of parameters that any jurisdictions have really widely bought into, because again, no jurisdiction has really been forced yet to make these really hard decisions. So that's why it's still there as a goal. And we say it's another tool out there. If we need it, we can use it, but it just hasn't become financially necessary yet, kind of in this community and, you know, sort of trading off with other communities. Does that make sense?
Maybe. I mean, it just seems fraught with loopholes.
Mhm.
it seems like it opens up a lot of doors for people that would want to say, this is what I want. How do I create a critical area so I can put what I want here?
Right.
And again, we've all been reading this kind of backwards, maybe how this is written, but it's how it, in my opinion, could be perceived by the public and developers and others that are looking at what is being reviewed right now and put together as being somewhat squishy.
Okay, we will rework that last bit of that paragraph and try to make the distinction of what we're referring to, that this is more of a countywide program and there's really not what are called receiving zones,
Okay.
applicable receiving zones at this point to do these transfers.
Because on 23, you say it straight up, maintain current inventory of critical areas in the city, period. And then you've got this transfer thing that's like, but over here. So anyway, those were my comments. Are there any other comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, can I go
Yes, Pat.
back just because it'd be easier than writing an email? So page 6 of the document, it's page 3 of the text. So in the summary of new and updated policies. So small thing, but it says a new policy to consider and I think it should be and prioritize equity and affordability. Instead of to consider and priority equity and sustainability. Affordability.
Okay.
Do you see where I am? Sorry. Page 3 of the document. Itself, page 6 of the packet. I don't know how to. So
Page 6 of the packet.
page 6 of the packet, yeah. Under the summary of.
Oh, so just in the staff report, okay.
Yeah,
I just
under
have
the
a
summary
typo
of
in the
new and
staff report.
updated policies. Yeah, new policy to consider and prioritize equity. And then page 15 of the document, well, E7 of the document, page 15 of the packet. Another small typo, just there's the section of small water bodies are, and then there's a comma there, which I don't think there should be. Small water bodies are scattered across the city, comma, including, but there's a comma after small water bodies are.
Yeah, and there's
That's
this,
struck out.
it's struck out and I don't know,
Oh.
I think, yeah, I don't know why that's in
Okay,
there.
the comma
This
is
is,
struck out. I didn't.
I think basically what happened is this was cut and pasted from another section and then for whatever reason, the track changes maintain that comma. And then as a strikeout.
I see it.
So there's
I
little,
didn't zoom in far enough.
yeah, so we'll clean that up. Because yeah, especially once we accept the track changes and have a clean version, it's a lot easier to see, especially when you have the sea of red. So,
Great, thank you.
I had to Google salmonid,
What? is-
salmonid,
Salmon.
I don't know.
salmonid,
Salmon.
salmid. I had to Google it because I was like, what? I haven't, and then I crossed it out. So anyway, we all learned something new today. Good job. What a great commission we are. Thank you. Are there any other comments from staff?
no, not on this. I appreciate the feedback.
You want to talk about schedule now or do you hold on?
Yeah, either way, I mean, we can do that as part of the director's report or we can talk about it now.
Preference from the commission? We're just trying to plan out and map out the next few months for you, so we can talk about it now or in 5 minutes.
Well, let's ask, since we have a guest in our audience. Hello, guest. You came in after we had guest comments, but I will allow you a couple minutes if you want to introduce yourself. Can you come up to the mic? Yes, please.
Push the red button.
Hello, I'm Lincoln Forsyth. I'm here for a mandatory assignment in my high school civics class,
Yes.
but not. I've had a curiosity about city government for some amount of time before that assignment was assigned, so it's not like I'm here entirely outside of my own will. I mean, everything's been pretty clear. This is cool to see. So yeah, I don't believe I have much to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming, Lincoln. Send your friends.
And you're now on camera on YouTube, so you got physical proof that you're here.
There you go. There you go. With that, let's do commissioners' reports and then turn it over to the directors and scheduling. Does that sound good? Commissioners' reports, Commissioner Packard.
I'm not sure how relevant this is here, but I have noticed just in the last week or two, coming from Everett back up the trestle, that first light has been getting increasingly worse to where the traffic is now backed up to that split on Highway 2. I don't know what changed in the last 2 weeks, but especially in the last 2 weeks, it has gotten bad. So I don't know if there's anything to do with the traffic or the light management, or I don't know. I don't see population growth spiking in 2 weeks and causing something substantial there, but it has been noticeable. Yes. Yeah. Even,
My drivers have noticed it though. Yeah.
even at 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, right? It's been rough.
Is that where you get like one car through and then it turns red immediately?
I don't know. It doesn't seem to be that bad. It's backing up considerably, so. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Morton,
I have nothing.
Commissioner Holt.
Yeah, can you guys email us where our meeting schedule is going to be for the rest of May, June, July, and August?
Yeah, and we were going to discuss discuss that preliminary tonight, and then we can finalize that and share that with
Right,
you.
because I think, isn't they're gonna have that thing here on Wednesdays again?
It is, yeah. And so we are already starting in June, we're going to be moving meetings to Mondays. And then as we'll kind of discuss a little bit later on, we probably have for the draft elements and for kind of the general conceptual issues, about 3 or 4 meetings that we need before we get to the public hearings. And so that would be your summer schedule. And so we want to try to chart that out. I know that Jennifer Davis is out on the 15th. And so and I'd sent the email just asking if people had any dates over the summer that they weren't available. So we can talk about that a little bit more.
So basically, we're not gonna be meeting on Wednesdays, we're gonna be meeting on Mondays.
Correct. Through June, July, and August. For
Okay.
any of the meetings that we hold, they would be on Mondays as opposed to Wednesdays.
Okay, and then just a heads up, there's a possibility I might be going to Norway to visit family for 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm not sure if I'm gonna do May, June, July, or August, or September yet, but I gotta talk to them to figure out the best time to come. But I would be gone for 4 to 6 weeks.
And I would, again, caution that we are on live and this is going to be something that is broadcast. So anything having to do with people's travel schedules, I would want to discuss after the meeting if I can just be so
Okay.
motherly about everybody's safety. Commissioner Dewar,
No report tonight.
and I have nothing. We'll turn the time over to you.
Okay, I didn't have a specific report tonight. I do want to welcome Dawn Erickson to the team. She will be clerking the meetings moving forward. She's the new administrative assistant for our department, and she has been a blessing so far. So we're very happy to have her. And you may see Jenny again on occasion, but Jenny will be stepping down from this function so she can focus on others. So
So just out of curiosity, Dawn, with your last name being Erickson, are you Swedish, Norwegian, or Danish? Oh.
My husband is.
Your husband is
Swedish.
Swedish, okay, because my entire family is Norwegian.
Yeah.
And we would be S-E-N, not S-O-N.
I did that genealogy thing several years ago and they give you updates all the time and apparently I'm part Italian. I never knew. They change it like every.
Well, have you been to
Again,
Italy?
okay,
anyway, that will-
again, like keeping in mind that we are a public meeting and want to make sure that we welcome you and we look forward to working with you. And I know that the other 2 members that are not here this evening will enjoy getting to know you. So welcome.
Then I did want to talk about schedule. We had a meeting earlier this afternoon, really trying to map out what we bring to you. And we also wanted to be meaningful to the planning commission. So I guess I'll just start it with, has the format been working for you that we're trying to tackle one chapter at a time? I know it's dense material, so we'll keep doing that. And as David said, we really have 2 big things to really tackle, and these are combined. So thinking about capital facilities along with transportation, And our goal with transportation, at least one thing we've discussed, is maybe doing more of an open house type format. That's the largest piece that we've not really introduced to the public yet, where we've had public engagement earlier in the year and have sort of covered the housing. And we've been doing that for, as we mapped it out today, we've been talking about housing and land use strategies for the last 6 years now, and, making incremental changes. So I think the community's pretty well engaged. But again, we're just sort of trying to get a temperature check from the commission on what's your capacity. We really have some milestones we need to meet as a staff. We need to get our environmental determination done probably in July. And again, we have about 4 elements we still need to cover with you. And we're thinking we can combine housing, land use, and transportation and capital facilities. And so we're just sort of trying to look at what does that look like from staff's perspective. If we had a second meeting in May, it would have to be a special meeting date. They're not going to be ready by the 15th. So it would have to be the 20th or the 29th. The 29th is problematic because then you turn around and have another meeting for 4 days later. So again, just trying to get a temperature check from the commission on what you think your capacity is to get through information. And we're heading into the most intensive chapters. Where we're kind of at is with the transportation, we're going to be able to give you a deep dive on sort of the back history, sort of the data set we use to make transportation recommendations, which then lead all the way through into how we make capital facilities decisions. So what's the volume, what's the safety record? And then again, with the theme you've heard, diversity, equity, and climate change, how are we now integrating these newer types of goals into that program? So again, the policy work's going to be a little different because we're also going to be able to show a lot of successes. What have we accomplished in the last 10 years? And what do we need to do? So the format of that's a little up in the air. Housing and land use, again, we've spent a tremendous amount of time talking about housing and land use, making incremental changes and policy changes to our code and our program. So really what we're thinking about is showing you the history of that. And again, sort of educational for the community, because we're really at a point that we've had a lot of community feedback. So it's almost more looking backwards, that this is what we've accomplished. And this is what we sort of talked about today. We're just down to sort of a narrow band of topics within this greater topic that we't need to substantially tackle. And we talked about this with you once with the income bands, where we've done a great job up to the 50% AMI, and it's, below 50 or specifically below 30, that's where we really want our policy focus to be with you. And those become more financial tools that we'll be looking at than what you've done in the past, where we can zone for this, we can zone for that, we can set the regulation that makes these things, again, at these higher income brackets easier to do. And now we're talking about really hard policy decisions that we'll want to go over with you so you can make those recommendations to the city council and just see what those final conversations kind of feel like. So that's kind of our plan. Again, we don't have any dates set yet, but it's important to us that we get a little bit of feedback so we can work on our calendars. And everybody today was in the room. I'm like, okay, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. Get ready, buckle up, because we got to get this information to the planning commission and keep on schedule. So anyway, I will be quiet and just get any feedback from the commission.
I can offer that Chair Davis is unavailable on Wednesdays. So if we were going to be meeting on the 15th, he had already asked that I head up that meeting. If we meet on the 20th, that would be a Monday.
Correct.
And I mean, I can't speak for him, but I know that Wednesdays are out.
These will all be Mondays.
Okay, so you're talking the 20th of May.
I probably misremembered the calendar. So
Okay, because we were moving into Mondays in June.
Yep.
But if you wanted to have a second meeting in May, you were saying it was either going to be the 20th or the 29th, and the 29th is a Wednesday. So if we were to include him,
the 27th then, so the 20th or the 27th.
Yeah, when we're dealing with a special meeting.
27th is Memorial Day.
Yeah, so we wouldn't have it on the 27th. So if we're scheduling a special meeting, you can hold it pretty much on any day, obviously. But yeah, I knew that about Commissioner Connor Davis, that he has the conflict on Wednesdays, I think through the end of the school year. And the 15th, I think, yeah, we want to make sure that we're valuing your time and bringing you materials that are worthy of holding a meeting. And I think we still have some additional work where we wouldn't have that ready for you on the 15th. So it was a question of whether, well, the 15th is the Wednesday. Yeah, we haven't transferred. It's not until June that we need to move to Mondays just to avoid the farmer's market.
Okay, so just to double check, our next meeting then will be May what?
Well, so that's what we're trying to figure out is if we've identified June 3rd as your first meeting that moves to Monday. We're trying to decide, if we hold a second meeting in May, it's not looking like it would be on your regularly scheduled May 15th. We would be looking at something later in the month, but then that really compacts the time between the meetings, like especially if we had something as late as the 29th, then you would only have less than a week between meetings. So you'd have kind of back-to-back weeks.
Does it make more sense then to just load up those 2 meetings in June?
That becomes, the next move.
Yeah, I think we can definitely do that.
I think with the commission that we have here, as long as it's handed to us in time for us to review, I would rather have less meetings, but more in depth,
Go a little bit. Yeah.
especially going into the next couple of months.
Yeah.
So if we could think about June 3rd then and June 17th would be those dates, and that actually probably will work better for staff. I know that they could get the information turned around in the next couple of weeks, but it would be a pretty big push and everyone's soul push. So if we target the 3rd and the 17th, we should be able to cover those remaining topics. And then depending on the commission's preference, we could do a summary meeting in July that sort of goes back over the entire document. We'd also talked about maybe that's the next open house we do. Again, if we're looking backwards, here's where we started, here's where we landed. So again, open to suggestions from the commission on what you want that format and material to look like.
Okay, and just to double check, our next meeting then will be June 3rd. We will not be doing May 22nd or 29th.
No.
So we're doing June 3rd is our next meeting.
June 3rd and June 17th.
Got it. Okay.
So my thought, and I think I've shared this before, is that you lose people as soon as July starts
Yep.
in the public. And I am concerned if we're going to have an open house that sort of reviews everything, that might be not very well attended. So I just offer that up. I don't know what the solution is, either to not have one or to do it so that it's,
There's not a
You
great
know,
solution at this point.
you're just going to lose people.
Well, and if it were, we can always hold an open house, like a more of a public facing open house outside of the planning commission. Where it wouldn't be obviously mandatory attendance, but where we would, commissioners that were able to attend and to help to facilitate that meeting. We could try to get that done before. Yeah, I would generally agree that once you get into July, it becomes a little bit more problematic. Once the school year is over, especially. So getting, the bulk of our work done by June 17th on the policy side, I think is ideal. And then that allows us to really get into our SEPA documentation and to issue that and to issue our draft documents so we can do our 60-day notice. So we can work on that a little bit more, but we appreciate the feedback.
I would suggest we cancel that first meeting in July. That would be the first.
Yeah.
But if we circled back on possibly the 8th or the 15th, that would be about the absolute latest for us to do that final community debrief. Because we have a 60-day notice period we need to do with the state, and then we would be going into hearings in September, so there would still be additional opportunities for the public to review the documents. So maybe so we talked about the dates in June, and is there a preference between the 8th as a special meeting or the 15th as your second scheduled meeting in July?
I would just as soon stick with the scheduled meetings.
Okay, let's do the 15th then. And we should be able to even issue stuff to Commerce by the beginning of July. Isn't dependent on that.
Yeah, no, we can still issue it.
Okay, so we're doing the 15th, we're not doing the 8th of July.
Correct.
So
then-
can, oh, sorry, I'll let you finish the scheduling. Go ahead.
No, I think that's about it, because we really, at that point, we might come back to the planning commission with any final adjustments to that body of work in August, but we'd really be looking then into September to start the public hearing
Okay.
schedule.
So we as a commission will have that, I guess, comprehensive summary review independent of the open house, or that's the same
That'd be the
the
same,
same event as where we'll get that kind of summary review as well.
yes.
Okay. And is that, I guess, what's the format? That's just a discussion, or there will be another staff report like this that we can reference and see all of that information?
We talked about that today, and we're gonna have to talk about it again,
Okay,
depending on when the timing was going to work. We had sort of talked about maybe doing an open house type format for the transportation element.
Okay.
We also talked about, do we want to do another summary public engagement? And so I think we're gonna have to talk about this again now that we have a finalized timeline. If it's a summary of everything, it lends itself more to a formal slideshow where we can sort of walk through the whole process.
yeah.
Because at that point, we're really not soliciting a lot of additional comment.
Yeah, ultimately, I'm just looking at your comments around, wanting to make a recommendation to city council on the entire comprehensive plan document. So can we get a preview of that, I guess, even the week prior, just to make sure that,
It's
right? Because if
early-
it's going to the city council, I would like to be able to say, hey, I've reviewed this comprehensively, looked at the summary document. Yes, I buy off on it. We've done
Well-
it piecemeal. It would be nice to just see it all together.
And just to clarify, so we would have a draft of we need to have a draft of the document that we share with the Department of Commerce, and that's what we're aiming to do by early July. So you would be able to review that, and that would be the entire document. The public hearing then the city council adoption can't be any sooner than 60 days after you issue that to the Department of Commerce. So your public hearing wouldn't likely be until September, so you would have plenty of time. You would have had a draft a couple months before that, so you'd have time to review the document well in advance of the required public hearings.
So that July meeting, again, that would be sort of the public interface, if you want to call it that
Sure.
we just want to go back to, we conducted a survey, mid last year, we had some open houses. This was the feedback. This is how we've integrated, public comment, new state law into the document, and that would be your first opportunity to see everything put together. But then we still have that August meeting that we can come back and do further refinement. And also sometime in that time frame, we need to do a check-in with the city council, which becomes this feedback loop that we want the city council to see the document or some pieces of the document before you make your final recommendations, if there is some adjustments that they would like
Okay.
to see that you need to also react to. So I think that August gives us that really good opportunity to have a little bit of that cross-pollination.
Great, thank you.
Anything else for the greater good?
Thank you.
May I please suggest, Ms. Erickson, that we send our new schedule to both of the Davises so that they are aware of the changes. I think we're all very clear. We've spoken about it over and over again in this meeting, but for their planning, that would be ideal.
And, I might have a request that we just start including the proposed schedule just at the back of the agenda or something like that. We seem to spend a lot of
And-
time rehashing the same ground every meeting. So if we just have it in front of us, maybe we can go a little faster through it.
Yeah, and I've done that in other jurisdictions where we have a
Really
look
cool.
ahead. We have a look ahead for the next couple of meetings, what we're going to be focusing on. So.
Thank you. With that, is there anything additional? Then do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned. Lincoln, thank you for coming.
Thank you for